Hello, boxing fans around the world. Thank you for joining me once again here on Talkin Fight for another episode of Boxing News today. And y'all know the result, right? We saw Tyson Fury box Oleksandr Usyk for the undisputed heavyweight title. So it is mired in controversy already. You've got the chatter, you've got the mutterings, the opinions, the quotes. Let's go through a couple of them. What I've heard, what you've seen. Derek Chisora, immediately after the fight, saying that was the slowest count he's ever heard. Then, of course, you have to reckon whether or not, given the ref had counted to the number 8 and allowed Tyson Fury to get back on his feet and go back into the fight, he was saved by the bell. I'm not saying Oleksandr Usyk won, but the result is he did win. So let's go with that. And let's see what someone else has to say about this matter, because I had mentioned last week about this whole undisputed affair, quite frankly, going back to the days of Lennox Lewis. So a chap by the name of Bob Newman writes, with respect to the heavyweight title and its undisputed nature, shall we say, now being passed on for the time being, another controversy regarding the IBF for the time being, over to Oleksandr Usyk. So here's what Bob Newman has to say. The process has included claims that the winner would have been the first undisputed heavyweight champ in 25 years, or since Lennox Lewis defeated Evander Holyfield in their rematch for the WBC, WBA, IBF titles. That win, however, meant Lewis was the unified champ at heavyweight, but not undisputed. That's because the reigning WBO champ at the time was Vitaly Klitschko. Lewis would hold his 3 belts for only 5 months, as the WBA would strip him for not signing to fight number 1 rated John Ruiz. The recently vanquished Holyfield would defeat Ruiz for the vacant WBA belt on August 12, 2000. By that time, Chris Bird had shocked the boxing world by defeating the elder Klitschko brother, who, despite being well ahead on the scorecards, retired to a stool with an unsurmountable lead due to a shoulder injury. Lewis was left with the WBC and IBF straps, which he would defend 3 times in 2000, until he shockingly was stopped with one punch by Hasim Rahman in South Africa in the 5th round on April 22nd, 2001. Ironically, the WBO formed in 1988. I believe that was a year Lennox Lewis won gold for Canada at the Olympics and crowned its first heavyweight champion. That was Italy's Francesco Damiani on May 6 of 1989, more than a month before Lennox Lewis ever even turned pro, let alone won any version of a world heavyweight title. Prior to Damian's inaugural annexation of the WBO strap, Mike Tyson was the last undisputed champion of the 3-belt era, making a defense of those 3 belts, WBA, WBC, IBF, against Frank Bruno on February 25th, 1989, 2.5 months before Damiani's WBO snag. So, if the WBO counts as one of the 4 major sanctioning bodies in boxing now, then it counted 25 years ago. Then Lennox Lewis was never undisputed heavyweight champion. No disrespect, he says, just the facts. So anyway, he goes, while we're discussing facts, it's Oleksandr, not Alexander Usyk, as so many in the media have mispronounced his name. Anyway, there's an update on that whole undisputed thing. Okay, so as a result of the fight, 2 things have come about. 1, there is a rematch clause stipulated, I suppose, in the contract that was negotiated between the Saudis and the various promoters. And it seems that if in fact they do, Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk, do decide to go into a rematch scenario, that could mean the IBF belt being stripped from Usyk, and therefore he would not be the undisputed heavyweight champ. And you might say that Daniel Dubois or his opponent, Filip Hrgovic, might in fact fight for that vacant IBF title, and that would be in June, by the way. So that's something I don't know if I'm looking forward to that. I mean, that kind of fits into the who cares category. But we will discuss these up and coming heavyweights in a second. So give me a moment here. Um, let's go back to the Usyk Fury fight for a sec. It seems after the fight, Usyk went to hospital after his press conference, I might add, because he may or may not have suffered a broken jaw. Now, naturally, his promoter Krasik has downplayed any injury fears concerning Usyk's future and said nothing major is wrong with him. So he went to the hospital after the press conference, and they made the exams. It's something like a 1 week recovery, no broken jaw. Thank God he's safe and sound. Yeah, okay. So, point is, though, if he does have a broken jaw, which he hotly denies, by the way, uh, he's okay. That's like saying Tyson Fury is an easy target because of the cut over his eye. So that cut never was reopened during the Usyk fight. So would Oleksandr Usyk be susceptible to a jaw injury in the future, no matter who he fights? That remains to be seen, obviously, and I don't have a crystal ball. But if I were fighting him, I'd go after his jaw. Anyway, I'm sure all fighters do. Anyway, let's have a quick look here. Gypsy King said at that press conference, have you seen my face? It's pretty busted up. And he's just gone to the hospital with a broken jaw, and he's busted too. So that's what Tyson Fury had to say. So, as I said, Krzyzewski explained a little bit further. He said, Usyk felt some discomfort in his upper jaw. The doctor said anything can happen, and this is a very sensitive area, so you need to be inspected as fast as possible. So he got his MRI, and word on the street, he doesn't have a broken jaw, but then I'm guessing he might have some kind of injury to his jaw, soft chin. In the other fight of note, another WBC heavyweight final eliminator, WBC's number 3, Agit Kabayel, 25-0, by the way, 17 knockouts, knocked out WBC number 2, Frank Sanchez, in the undercard of that Fury Usyk fight. And that happened in round number 7 over in Riyadh. So, kind of good news for the heavyweight side of thing, because Kabayel now has consecutive upset wins against Sanchez and Arsenabak Makhmudov, who was in his fight a 9-1 favorite. So if you take a look at who now is, shall we say, leading the way in terms of up-and-comers wanting to face a champion, it is interesting to note, one more point here, Tyson Fury, after the fight, said he's done with boxing. So has he retired? I don't know. So let's hope he does retire, only because it helps to unclog that heavyweight division. And if Usyk is injured well enough to put his next fight on hold, then we might see some of these up-and-comers go toe-to-toe and produce some more classics in the heavyweight division. Nonetheless, the fight on Saturday between Usyk and Fury, I'm not so sure. In my opinion, it was a classic because in the 9th, I did think that Usyk did deserve a TKO. I did think that Fury was injured. He was against the ropes. I didn't like his showboating early on, but yeah, Fury was leading, quite frankly, I would say, up until that point. But I would say also Usyk definitely deserved a TKO in that ninth round. Anyway, so who's up and coming? According to ESPN, and the fellow's name is Nick Parkinson. I don't know if you read this guy or not, but he says Anthony Joshua is the top contender. That remains to be seen. I mean, I'd picked this guy way back. Remember when he fought Usyk for the first time? I thought for sure Joshua was going to take care of business and defeat Usyk. Boy, was I wrong on both counts, because they fought twice. Up-and-comers, include Deontay Wilder, obviously. But in that middle of the pack, you've got other fighters like Zhilai Zhang. But he is a tad on the older side now. Yeah, he's up there with Deontay Wilder. Whether or not these guys can make comebacks or not, they had their chances in Riyadh a few months ago. Fury's knocked out Wilder, I think probably twice, I think. Hellenius, I'm not sure he's in the mix, quite frankly, but you never know. Joseph Parker could be in that mix. I mean, he's pretty good. He's a big boy. He's pretty good. I like him, but is he in that mix? And again, let's go back to Agit Kabayel. Um, really, as this writer said, he says he dropped Sanchez first with a 2-punch body combination, then a stabbing left jab for the knockout. But Sanchez offered a limited threat, and there are bigger punchers in the division than the 31-year-old Kabayel. We have Andy Ruiz, we have Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who will meet in a heavyweight contender on August 3rd. But they've fallen in the rankings lately for obvious reasons. We have Filip Hrgovic from Croatia. Another fighter's failed to convince recently. Perhaps he's been treading carefully while waiting for the mandatory at the IBF side of things. As we all know, he was involved in, quote unquote, a snoozer of a fight last August against Dempsey McKean, and then hardly broke a sweat against veteran Mark Demori. But he did have that decision win over Zhang in 2022, but that was a bit controversial as well. So Hrgovic is in the mix as well. Next generation fighters leading the pack, without a doubt. Jared Anderson out of America at 17-0. He still has to fight yet a really decent fighter. Let's be honest, he does, and see how he fares. He's only 24 years old though, and he already has top 5 rankings within 3 of the 4 governing bodies. And I think realistically that leaves us with guys like Daniel Dubois, Moses Totuamo, Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark, chaps like this, up-and-comers, I suppose, who are on the outside looking up right now. But anyway, just a rundown of the heavyweights for you, and a bit of news on the side, and a bit of opinion and rumors and chatter that's going on right now. It's good to see that Gervonta Tank Davis Benavidez pay-per-view undercard's been finalized. We're going to see super lightweight Gary Antoine Russell, 17-0, 17 knockouts, take on former WBA champ Alberto Puello. He's 22-0, 10 knockouts for the vacant WBC interim title at 140 pounds. And the newly elevated WBC middleweight champ Carlos Adames, he's 23-1, 18 knockouts. He's going to go toe-to-toe against Terrell Guasha. All right, so that's the pay-per-view opener. So this is when Tank Davis is going to defend his WBA lightweight title against Frank the Ghost Martin, while David Benavidez makes his 175-pound debut against former light heavyweight champ Oleksandr the Nail Govdik in a matchup for the WBC interim light heavyweight title. So there you go. So finally that undercard has been announced, and that's going to be a pretty good fight as well, featuring, as I said, Tank Davis and David Benavidez in separate fights, of course, but nonetheless, both for titles. Anyway, oh yes, one of my favorite fighters, Steve Claggett. WBO junior welterweight champion Teofimo Lopez, 20-1, 13 knockouts, will defend his world title against Steve the Dragon Claggett, 38-7-2, 26 knockouts. That's going to take place on Saturday, June 29th. At the James L. Knight Center in downtown Miami, Florida. It's a 10-round featherweight co-feature. We're going to see former WBO world champ and 2-time Olympic gold medalist Robeisy Ramirez, 13-2. He's going to return against Brandon Benitez, 21-2. The 6-round televised opener sees middleweight prospect Nico Ali Walsh, we've mentioned him often, 10-1, attempt to avenge his only pro defeat in a rematch against Sona Akali. He's 9-1. Okay, so that Teofimo Claggett Ramirez Benavidez, Ali Walsh Akali will be broadcast live on ESPN. Said Bob Arum, Teofimo Lopez is among the most electrifying fighters in the sport, and I know he's motivated to put on a show against a very tough challenger in Steve Claggett. Robeisy Ramirez wants to become a 2-time world champion, and the road back starts in his adopted hometown. Nico Ali Walsh has been asking for the Akali rematch from the moment the judge's decision came back after their first fight, and now he has a chance for revenge. Thank you, Bob. All right, let's go back to ESPN for a sec. Andres Hales reporting that the first international signee of Jake Paul, who, by the way, should I mention, heavyweight? Anyway, Jake Paul's company, Most Valuable Promotions, has signed an international boxer. And this chap will feature on the undercard of Jake Paul's fight on July 20th against Mike Tyson. India's Niraj Goyat, 18-4-2, 8 knockouts, will compete for the first time under the MVP banner against Brazilian superstar Whindersson Nunes in a 6-round super middleweight bout contested at 165 pounds. Goyat, he's 32 years of age, is the first Indian fighter to make the WBC World Rankings and is recognized as one of the best boxers in the country. Keeping in mind, you're talking about 1 billion people over there. He utilized a social media campaign earlier this year in an effort to land a fight with Paul, but instead found himself signing with Paul's promotion company. Goyat has over 1 million followers on Instagram and has appeared on Indian television and Bollywood movies. Shall we say a name to watch? In that whole names to watch category, I'm looking forward to this fight. It's a decent rematch as well. Mainly will appeal to the Scottish versus English boxing fans out there. Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall are about to go toe-to-toe, and they've waited over 2 years to settle their little grudge. And this weekend, they're going to go at it. Scotland's Taylor was fighting on home turf when he won a hotly contested decision against Catterall in February 2022, with most observers saying the Englishman was hard done by. So a rematch has been delayed multiple times, most recently ahead of a planned April date when Taylor suffered an injury. But the Scot and Catterall are finally due to clash again this weekend, Saturday night. Since that first fight, by the way, Taylor has fought and lost once, dropping his final world title to Tifon Lopez last year after vacating and being stripped of his other belt. Meanwhile, Catterall has picked up 2 wins. So that's, in my humble opinion, is going to be a pretty decent fight, said Josh Taylor. Sorry, hang on. Let's go back a step. Says Catterall, I want to knock Josh Taylor out cold. Jack Catterall believes that a win over arch nemesis Josh Taylor at the First Direct Arena in Leeds will springboard him towards a long-awaited world title shot in the competitive super lightweight division. The bitter rivals finally rematch in a huge showdown this weekend on DAZN in the UK and around the world on ESPN+. And Catterall, 28-1, says the comprehensive win over the former undisputed 140-pound ruler Taylor will prove that he belongs on the big stage. He went on to say, I think we've had 2 years since that fight when I've matured in and out of the ring. I've been doing a lot of developing. I think it's my time now to prove that I do belong in these big fights. Once I beat Josh, I'll go on and win a world title. Wow. Now, speaking of numbers, I'm going to conclude today's episode with something of a interesting headliner. Okay, we've all debated, boxing's ranking in terms of how many people watch what kind of sport. Is the National Football League soccer/football, cricket, golf, tennis. There's a whack of sports that are played globally, and there's a whack that are available on pay-per-view. Perhaps the MMA, UFC, in terms of combat sports, challenge most heavily with boxing. But it was really interesting to note this particular fact. Well, okay, fact, not really. But Oleksandr's victory over Tyson Fury was watched by at least 20 million people using illegal streams, costing TV rights holders around 95 million pounds. So this was an online intelligence company called YieldSec. And it seriously evidenced 2,000 different streaming locations broadcasting the fight from Riyadh, with 18% of those watching illegally from the UK. Now, I was flipping back and forth between the to hear the different commentators, quite frankly, and how they were reacting to each round. Sky Sports, TNT Sports, and DAZN. And it was interesting from my perspective. It was interesting to hear all the different comments that they were making in terms of who was winning and who was losing. But anyway, so going back to those 4 million people from the UK, it says yield sex analysis shows that 45% of illegal streaming took place in Europe, 25% in North America, and 16% in Asia. Okay, might have been illegal to do so, to watch illegally, but at the end of the day, it shows that boxing does have a massive audience around the world, and that should be taken into account with respect to these pundits who say that, you know, UFC and or MMA or any other sport legitimately is bigger, or if not more popular than boxing. My money's on boxing in terms of how popular it is around the world, whether in the amateur ranks or professional ranks. You take a look at a continent like Africa, a continent like Asia, continent like Australia. It is immensely popular in those continents, not to mention, of course, North America, South America, Central America, and Europe. You take all these continents and territories into place and put them all together, and you've got a ton million of fans watching boxing. All right. I'm hoping for a rematch, and yeah, and I think Robicio will get a rematch against Rafael Espinoza as well. Thanks very much for joining our chat there. At the end of the day, you know, who really cares about the IBFs and the WBOs and all that kind of stuff? It's realistically, well, I think Tyson Fury's proven it. It's about the money, isn't it? The 100 million quid he got for that fight. You know, and the showboating he did. I mean, it was obvious. I'm not so sure he took it that seriously. Perhaps he did. And has he retired? Perhaps he has. And at the end of the day, I hope he has, not because I don't like him, but because it just unclogs that heavyweight division. All right, boxing fans, appreciate you joining me. And remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell for me. Join me, watch me often on talkinfight.com, and make me rich.